For centuries, the Indian subcontinent was this incredible patchwork of powerful, homegrown kingdoms. But then, right around the turn of the first millennium, everything started to change. A new force began to sweep in from the northwest. And here's the thing, they didn't just come to raid, they came to rule, kicking off a chain of events that would forge a whole new empire and, well, reshape the subcontinent's destiny forever.
When we think about Islamic rule in the subcontinent, it's usually these magnificent structures, like Delhi's incredible Jama Masjid, that pop into our heads. I mean, they're the grand legacies of seriously powerful empires. But these buildings, they're the end of a very long story, not the beginning. So the real question is, how did it all get started? Where did this story actually begin?
And that's exactly the journey we're going to take today. We're going to dig into how a series of scattered invasions slowly but surely evolved into a huge, centralized empire based right in Delhi, a sultanate that would end up dominating the subcontinent for over 300 years.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with how this new power arrived on the scene. Then we'll look at the first big wave of invasions, the Ghaznavids, and the huge turning point that came with the Ghurids. After that, we'll see how the Delhi Sultanate was actually built, explore the fascinating parallel story of the Sufis, and finally, see how this entire era set the stage for the next great empire. Let's get into it.
So, while the very first Muslim conquests actually came by sea from Arabia, they didn't really stick around. The wave that truly, fundamentally reshaped the subcontinent came from a totally different direction and a different group of people. Turkic warriors and nomads from Central Asia, and they came pouring in through the legendary Khyber Pass.
Okay, let's get our bearings on the timeline. We're talking about the late 10th century. In 977 AD, a guy named Subcontinent establishes the Ghaznavid dynasty in what is now Afghanistan. Now, what's really interesting is that he was a slave officer. This was a common thing back then, where talented slaves were trained up to be elite soldiers and administrators, and they could rise to incredible positions of power. This new dynasty set the stage for a new, aggressive force right on the subcontinent's doorstep.
Subcontinent's son, Mahmud of Ghazni, would take this new power and turn it into an absolutely formidable conquering force. But his whole focus, his goal, was very different from what came later.
I mean, just look at the size of his empire. It's massive. The Ghaznavids controlled this huge territory, stretching all the way from modern-day Iran into the Punjab region of the subcontinent. This gave Mahmud a really powerful base of operations to launch his campaigns.
Mahmud's approach was just relentless. He invaded the subcontinent an incredible 17 times. Yes, 17. His most famous raid was on the super-wealthy Somnath Temple in 1025. But here's the key thing to understand. His goal wasn't to stay and build an empire in India. Nope. It was to plunder its wealth to fund his own capital back in Ghazni. He did, however, capture Lahore, and he turned it into a really important political and cultural outpost for his empire.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Mahmud's repeated successes weren't just about his own strength. They revealed something huge about the subcontinent at the time. The local rulers were totally divided. They just couldn't form a united front against him. And this, well, it basically rolled out the red carpet for future invaders who had even bigger ambitions. And that brings us to the next big players on the scene, the Ghurids. They rose up from the hilly parts of Afghanistan after the Ghaznavids started to weaken, and their leader, Muhammad of Ghor, had a very different plan. He wasn't just a raider, he wanted to be a ruler.
This ambition led straight to a massive showdown with the powerful Rajput king Prithviraj Chauhan for control of northern India. Their entire fate was sealed in two super dramatic battles at a place called Tehran. In the first battle, in 1191, Muhammad of Ghor's army was completely crushed. He was even badly wounded himself, total defeat. But he wasn't done. He came back just 1 year later in 1192 with a bigger, better prepared army, and this time he scored a decisive victory, a complete turnaround.
I really can't overstate this moment. The Second Battle of Tehran wasn't just another win. It was the turning point. It completely shattered Rajput power in the north and threw the gates wide open for the first ever permanent Islamic kingdom based inside India.
So, after Muhammad of Ghor died in 1206, his most trusted general, a former slave named Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, took control of all his Indian territories. He declared himself sultan, made Delhi his capital, and just like that, the Delhi Sultanate was born.
And this wasn't some short-lived kingdom either. The Delhi Sultanate would rule over huge parts of the subcontinent for more than 300 years. We're talking from 1206 all the way to 1526, leaving a massive mark on its culture, its architecture, and its politics.
Now, this 300-year period wasn't ruled by just one family. Instead, you had 5 different dynasties take their turn on the throne in Delhi. It all started with the slave dynasty, founded by those former slaves turned generals. Then came the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, the Sayyids, and finally, the Lodis.
The early years of the Sultanate were really defined by some amazing people. You've got Aibak, the founder. Then his successor, Iltutmish, who really solidified the empire's power and got the administration running smoothly. And then you have Iltutmish's daughter, Razia Sultana, who was a complete and total trailblazer.
Let's just stop and talk about Razia for a second, because her story is incredible. Her own father, the Sultan Iltutmish, chose her to be his heir over all of his sons. He saw that she had superior skill and competence. This made her the first and only Muslim woman to ever rule from the throne of Delhi, a ruler who had all the qualities of a fantastic leader.
But, and it's a big but, despite all her talent, the powerful Turkish nobles just could not accept being ruled by a woman. They were constantly plotting against her, and after only 4 years on the throne, she was overthrown and killed. Her story is just a powerful reminder of the huge, deep-seated challenges she was up against.
The Sultanate kept growing under the later dynasties. Al-Din Khilji, for example, successfully fought off multiple Mongol invasions and pushed the empire's borders deep into southern India. A bit later, Muhammad bin Tughlaq ruled over the Sultanate when it was at its absolute largest. But his reign was also known for these wildly ambitious but kind of chaotic projects, like his infamous decision to forcibly move the entire capital from Delhi hundreds of miles south to Daulatabad, a plan that ended in total disaster.
But look, the story of this era isn't just about sultans and armies and battles. Running right alongside all that political drama was a much quieter, more spiritual movement. This was the story of the Sufis, and their mission was a different kind of conquest. It wasn't about land, it was about winning hearts and minds.
So what exactly is Sufism? Well, you can think of it as a mystical branch of Islam, one that's really focused on creating a personal, spiritual closeness with God. Sufi saints and preachers spread their faith not with a sword, but through their teachings of love and humanity. Their simple, pious lives attracted people from all walks of life, and that inspired a lot of them to convert.
And this gives us such a great picture of the two parallel forces at work here. On one side, you've got the political power of the sultans, symbolized by these grand monuments made of stone, like the Qutb Minar. And on the other side, you've got the spiritual influence of the Sufis, whose humble shrines became these powerful centers of culture and devotion for people of all faiths.
So after 3 centuries, the Delhi Sultanate started to get weak. The final dynasty, the Lodis, they really struggled to keep control over their huge, fractured empire. The stage was being set for another dramatic change, another turning point.
So, when it's all said and done, what's the ultimate legacy of the Delhi Sultanate? Well, for 320 years, it fundamentally wove Turco-Persian culture, language, and architecture into the very fabric of the subcontinent. That's huge. But maybe, just maybe, its greatest legacy was that it paved the way for what came next. The internal weakness of that last sultan was like an open invitation, and a new conqueror from the north, Babur, saw his chance. In 1526, he swept in, defeated the Lodi Sultan, and laid the foundation for an even grander, more famous empire, the Mughals. The age of sultans was over, but it had perfectly set the stage for the age of emperors.